Arthur stood on the rusted grating of the 4th Street Bridge. The wind down here screamed, tearing at his clothes, but he didn't feel the cold. He was burning up from the inside. In his trembling hand, he held a wet piece of cardboard. It wasn't trash. To him, it was a map. A set of coordinates scribbled in black marker. 3405, 11825. He looked over the edge. The black water of the river churned 50 feet below. Most people would see a suicide attempt, but Arthur wasn't trying to die. He was trying to ascend. He was waiting for the final piece of the puzzle. A car drove by, its headlights sweeping across the bridge structure. The light briefly illuminated a graffiti tag on the steel beam next to him. It read, "Jump." Arthur smiled. A broken, terrifying smile. "Okay," he whispered, his voice lost in the storm. "I hear you. I'm listening." He closed his eyes and leaned forward, shifting his weight past the point of no return. He wasn't crazy. He was just obedient. But Arthur had forgotten the most dangerous thing about listening to the universe. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it lies. 30 days earlier, Arthur was a ghost in his own life. He was a data analyst for a logistics firm, a job that involved staring at spreadsheets until his eyes burned. He lived in a beige apartment, drove a beige sedan, and felt a beige emptiness in his chest. He was desperate for meaning. He wanted to believe that life wasn't just a random series of biological accidents. One night, insomniac and scrolling through YouTube, the algorithm fed him a video about Carl Jung. The video narrated the famous story of the golden scarab, a moment where a patient's dream of a beetle coincided perfectly with a real beetle tapping on the window. Jung called it synchronicity, and a causal connecting principle, a wink from the universe. Arthur sat up in bed. The blue light of the screen reflected in his glasses. The narrator said, "If you pay attention, the universe will guide you." Before we watch Arthur destroy his life, I need to ask you something. Pause the video for a second. Have you ever seen the number 1111 on your clock and felt a strange shiver? Do you see the same animal or hear the same name over and over again? Go to the comments right now. Type yes if you think these are messages from the universe, or no if you think it's just your brain playing tricks. I want you to commit to an answer now, because by the end of this story, you might change your mind. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the whir of the laptop fan. It was a Friday night, the graveyard shift of the soul for a single man in his 30s. Arthur sat bathed in the blue light of his screen, his eyes dry and unblinking. He had spent the last 3 hours falling down a YouTube rabbit hole. It started with ancient civilizations, drifted into quantum physics for beginners, and finally landed on a channel he had never seen before. The thumbnail was a simple black background with a golden beetle in the center. The video was titled "The Golden Scarab: How Carl Jung Hacked Reality." Arthur clicked. The narrator had a voice like gravel and honey. He told the story of Jung's patient, a woman of extreme rationality, a woman locked in the cage of her own logic. She was telling Jung a dream about a golden scarab being given to her. Jung, frustrated by her stubbornness, heard a tapping at the window. He opened it, caught a flying beetle, a rose chafer, the closest thing to a golden scarab in that climate, and presented it to her. "Here is your scarab," Jung had said. The coincidence was so impossible, so statistically non-existent, that it shattered the woman's rational worldview instantly. It broke her open. It allowed the magic in. Arthur paused the video. He looked around his beige apartment. Everything was so logical. The IKEA bookshelf, the meal prep containers drying on the rack, the carefully organized bills. He had done everything right. He followed the rules. And yet, he felt like he was suffocating in a vacuum. He was that woman. He was trapped in the cage of logic. "I need a scarab," he whispered. The sound of his own voice startled him. He looked at the digital clock on his cable box. 11:11. The numbers glowed with a neon intensity that seemed to vibrate. Arthur's breath hitched. He knew, intellectually, that 11:11 happens twice a day. He knew that thousands of people were looking at clocks right now. But logic was the cage. This felt personal. It felt like the universe had heard his whisper and winked back. He felt a sudden surge of adrenaline, a physical sensation, like electricity arcing from his spine to his fingertips. It was the thrill of the unknown. He grabbed a spiral-bound notebook from his coffee table. He didn't just want to think about this, he wanted to formalize it. If he was going to break reality, he needed a contract. He clicked his pen. The sound echoed in the empty room. He wrote the date at the top of the page. Then, in capital letters, he wrote, "The Surrender Experiment." He began to write the terms. His handwriting was jagged, fueled by the sudden manic energy. Rule 1, logic is the enemy. Logic has led me to a dead end. Therefore, I will ignore logic. Rule 2, coincidence does not exist. Everything is data. Everything is a message. Rule 3, total obedience. If the signs say go, I go. If the signs say stop, I stop. No hesitation, no second guessing. Rule 4, duration. 30 days. He stared at the paper. It looked insane. It looked like the manifesto of a madman. But to Arthur, in that moment, it looked like a map out of prison. He signed his name at the bottom. "Okay," he said, closing the notebook. "I'm yours. Show me what you've got." He went to bed, but he didn't sleep. He lay there, his heart drumming a rhythm of anticipation. He felt like a child on Christmas Eve, waiting for morning to reveal the presents under the tree. Arthur woke up at 7 a.m. sharp. Usually, he would hit snooze 3 times. Today, his eyes snapped open. He felt light. He showered, dressed, and stood by his front door. The old Arthur would have walked the 3 blocks to the subway, taken the train to the financial district, and bought a bagel at the cart near his office. Arthur looked at the door handle. "I'm listening," he murmured. "Guide me." He stepped out onto the sidewalk. The morning air was crisp. The city was waking up, garbage trucks groaning, taxis honking. He stood still in the flow of pedestrian traffic, a rock in a stream, waiting for a current to take him. A convertible drove past, top down despite the chill. The bass was thumping so hard it rattled Arthur's chest. The lyrics of an old blues song drifted back to him. "Black coffee and a cigarette. That's what I need to set me free." Coffee. Arthur didn't smoke, but the coffee instruction was clear. But which coffee shop? There was a Starbucks on the corner and a Dunkin' across the street. He looked down. On the sidewalk, someone had dropped a playing card. It was face up. The 3 of clubs. 3. Arthur looked up. 3 doors down from where he stood was a small independent cafe he had never noticed before. It had a faded green awning. The sign above the door read, "The Third Rail." The hairs on Arthur's arms stood up. 3 of clubs, the third rail. It was a direct match. The statistical probability of standing next to a dropped card that matched the name of the nearest shop was, well, he didn't care about the math. He cared about the feeling. He walked into the third rail. The bell above the door chimed, a bright, welcoming sound. The smell of roasted beans was thick and comforting. The place was empty except for a barista with bright blue hair who was wiping down the counter. "Morning," she said, not looking up. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee," Arthur said, his voice steady. "And, do you sell cigarettes?" The barista looked up then, a smirk playing on her lips. "This is a cafe, not a bodega, honey, but..." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a pack of American spirits. She shook one out and placed it on the counter next to a book of matches. "I'm quitting anyway. Consider it a gift." Arthur stared at the cigarette. He didn't want it. He wouldn't smoke it. But it was a totem. A physical proof that the song on the street wasn't random noise. It was a prophecy. He reached into his back pocket to pay for the coffee. His hand met empty fabric. He froze. He patted his other pocket. Nothing. He checked his jacket. Nothing. The wallet was on his dresser at home. The cold spike of panic hit him instantly. The shame, the awkwardness, the illusion of the magical morning shattered. He was just a guy who forgot his wallet, about to be embarrassed in front of a cool girl with blue hair. Arthur stammered. I'm so sorry, I left my wallet. The barista's smile faded. She sighed, her hand moving to take the coffee cup back. It happens. Come back when you can pay. No, wait, Arthur said. The rules. Rule 2. Coincidence does not exist. Why was he here? Why did the universe send him here to be humiliated? That didn't make sense. There had to be a solution in the immediate environment. Just give me a second, Arthur said. He looked down at the floor. He looked at the counter. He looked at the tip jar. Nothing. He looked at the small bookshelf in the corner of the cafe. A take a book, leave a book community library. He felt a pull, a magnetic tug in his gut. He walked over to the shelf. His eyes scanned the spines. Moby Dick, the Da Vinci Code, a cookbook. And then he saw it. A thin, battered paperback with a blue spine. The Psychology of the Unconscious by Carl Jung. Arthur almost laughed. It was too on the nose. It was like a writer was scripting this scene and being too heavy-handed. He pulled the book off the shelf. As he did, something fluttered out from between the pages and drifted to the floor. It landed face up. It was a $20 bill. Crisp. Old style. Arthur stared at the money. The cafe went silent. The espresso machine stopped hissing. The traffic outside seemed to mute. He picked up the bill. He turned to the barista, holding it up like a holy relic. I found this, he said. The barista laughed. No way. That's been sitting there for weeks. Lucky day, dude. Arthur paid. He tipped her the remaining $15. He walked out of the cafe with the black coffee in one hand and the unlit cigarette in the other. He felt drunk. He felt high. He felt dangerous. The panic of the missing wallet had been the test. The universe wanted to see if he would crumble or if he would trust. He had trusted. And the universe had provided instant cash, hidden inside the very book that had started his journey. He walked toward his office, but stopped at the crosswalk. The light was red. Arthur waited. He took a sip of the coffee. It was the best coffee he had ever tasted. The light turned green. He walked. The next light turned green as he approached. And the next. And the next. He walked 10 blocks. He didn't stop once. It was the green wave. In city traffic, hitting 10 consecutive green lights is a statistical anomaly. It requires perfect timing, perfect walking speed. Arthur wasn't walking. He was gliding. He felt the rhythm of the city grid syncing with his heartbeat. The lights weren't just traffic signals. They were permission slips. Yes, yes, yes. He arrived at his office building. He stood in the lobby. He looked at the elevator bank. Usually he would feel a pit in his stomach arriving at work, the dread of the spreadsheets, the boredom. But today, as he stepped into the elevator, he was smiling. He wasn't just a data analyst anymore. He was a wizard who had just discovered his powers. He was an initiate. The elevator doors closed. He was alone in the metal box. I get it, he said to the ceiling. I'm ready for more. The lights in the elevator flickered once. It was a small surge, probably just old wiring. But to Arthur, it was a high five. The seduction was complete. The universe had love-bombed him. It gave him the thrill, the mystery, and the reward. It had proven that if he surrendered control, he would be taken care of. He didn't know that this was the bait. He didn't know that the green wave would eventually lead him to a red ocean. He didn't know that the voice he was listening to wasn't God, but the echo of his own desperation bouncing off the walls of a hollow reality. He just knew that for the first time in his life he was awake, and he never wanted to sleep again. The first week was the pink cloud phase. It was seductive. It was magical. Arthur felt a connection to everything. The world, previously cold and indifferent, now felt intimate. He started small. If he couldn't decide what to eat for lunch, he'd wait for a color. A woman walked by in a yellow dress. He ate at the place with the yellow awning. The food was delicious. Confirmation. If he was debating whether to email a client, he'd wait for a sound. A car horn honked twice. 2 honks meant, go. The client responded positively. Confirmation. His brain was flooded with dopamine. Every coincidence felt like a little reward, a pat on the head from God. But by day 10, the reticular activating system in Arthur's brain began to shift gears. The RAS is the filter that decides what information gets through to your conscious mind. Usually, it filters out 99% of the noise, the background chatter, the colors of cars, the random numbers. But Arthur had reprogrammed his RAS. He had given it a new command. Everything is relevant. Let everything in. The noise started to get loud. It began with the number 23. Arthur saw it on a license plate, 4JZ232, then on a receipt, $12, 23s. Then, looking at the microwave, 0:23 seconds left. Most people would shrug this off. But Arthur stopped working. He sat at his desk, staring at the spreadsheet. Row 23, column 23. The data in that cell was for a shipment of red oxide. Red. He looked up. His boss, Mr. Henderson, was wearing a red tie. Arthur's heart began to hammer. The connection was obvious to him now. The universe was warning him about Henderson. Red means danger. Red means blood. The number 23 means chaos. Arthur? Henderson asked, stepping into the cubicle. You've been staring at that screen for an hour. Is everything okay? To Arthur, Henderson's voice sounded distorted, like audio playing backward. The tie seemed to glow. I know what you're doing, Arthur whispered. Excuse me? The shipment, the red oxide. It's a code, isn't it? Arthur stood up, knocking his chair over. The universe told me? Henderson looked at him with genuine concern, which Arthur interpreted as guilt. Arthur, go home. You look sick. Home, Arthur muttered. He looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand was ticking. Tick, tick, tick. It synced perfectly with the blinking light on the smoke detector. Get out! Arthur grabbed his bag and ran out of the office. He didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, all 12 flights, because the elevator button was glowing red. He never went back to work. By day 20, Arthur's apartment had transformed into the cockpit of his madness. The blinds were drawn tight, taped to the window frames to prevent unauthorized light signals from entering. The beige walls were covered in a chaotic tapestry of sticky notes, string, and torn maps. He wasn't eating. He had decided that he could only eat when he saw a bird fly upward. If a bird flew downward, it meant the food was poisoned. He spent hours staring out the crack in his blinds, starving, waiting for a pigeon to ascend. His girlfriend, Sarah, tried to save him. She came over on a rainy Tuesday evening. When she entered, the smell hit her first: stale sweat, rotting fruit, and the metallic tang of unwashed bodies. Arthur? She called out. He was sitting in the center of the living room floor, surrounded by 3 radios, all tuned to different static frequencies. Shh, he hissed, pressing a finger to his lips. It's transmitting. What is transmitting? Arthur, you lost your job. Your mom called me. She's terrified. You need to stop this. Arthur looked at her, really looked at her. But he didn't see the woman he loved. His RAS was highlighting details that fit his new narrative of paranoia. He saw the way her hands were shaking, guilt. He saw a small drop of rain on her coat, water element, drowning. He saw her necklace, a small silver circle, a noose. Who sent you? Arthur asked, his voice flat. "What? I'm Sarah. I drove here because I love you." "You're wearing the circle." He pointed at the necklace. "The circle is the loop. You want to keep me in the loop. The radio told me." "Arthur, please, let me take you to a doctor." She took a step forward. Suddenly, one of the radios cut through the static with a blast of commercial noise. A car dealership ad shouted, "Don't let them take you for a ride! Cut them loose!" The timing was precise, to the millisecond. Arthur stood up, his eyes wide with horror. The universe had spoken. She was an agent of the Matrix. She was here to drag him back to the sleep state. "Get out," he said. "Arthur! Get out!" he screamed, grabbing a lamp and hurling it at the wall. It shattered, sending sparks raining down on the carpet. Sarah ran. She slammed the door behind her. Arthur locked the deadbolt, then the chain. Then he pushed the sofa in front of the door. He was shaking, tears streaming down his face, but he felt a perverse sense of victory. He had passed the test. He had sacrificed his love for the truth. He went back to the radios. "I did it," he whispered to the static. "What's next?" The static hissed. To Arthur's ears, it sounded like applause. By day 29, the boundary between the internal and external world had dissolved completely. This is the stage of psychosis where ideas of reference become absolute. A man coughing on the street wasn't sick. He was signaling Arthur to turn left. A headline on a newspaper, "Market Crash," wasn't about finance. It was about Arthur's spiritual state. He was physically deteriorating. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark bruises from lack of sleep. The RAS works on dopamine and adrenaline, keeping the brain in a state of high alert, a fight-or-flight mode that never ends. Arthur was running a marathon every single minute of the day. He needed an endgame. The signs were becoming too intense, too rapid. They were building toward a crescendo. He was sitting in his kitchen, watching a dripping faucet. Drip, drip, drip. Morse code, DOWN. He looked down. A cockroach scurried across the linoleum and squeezed into a crack near the baseboard. Arthur lay on the floor, pressing his ear to the crack. He could hear the wind whistling through the hollow spaces of the building. But inside the wind, he heard a voice. It was low, guttural, and distinct. "The Railyard, Sector 4, the tanker, the truth is waiting." It was a hallucination, born from sleep deprivation and synaptic misfiring, but to Arthur, it was the voice of God. He stood up. He grabbed his coat. He grabbed a flashlight. He didn't take his phone. The phone was a tracking device for the agents. He didn't take his wallet. Money was a construct of the lie. He walked out into the night. It was raining. The sky was a bruised purple. The city looked like a labyrinth designed just for him. He was ready to meet the architect. The walk to the Railyard took 3 hours. It was a pilgrimage through the underworld. Arthur walked through neighborhoods he had never seen before, industrial wastelands where streetlights flickered and died as he passed. Every step was heavy with portent. A dog barked at him from behind a chain-link fence. To Arthur, it was Cerberus, guarding the gates of Hades. He bowed to the dog and whispered a password he made up on the spot. The dog stopped barking. Confirmation. He found a child's lost shoe in the gutter. It was pointing north. He turned north. He was cold, soaked to the bone, shivering violently. But his mind was on fire. He was convinced that at the end of this journey, he would be rewarded. Maybe he would transcend his physical body. Maybe he would be given the lottery numbers to save the world. Maybe he would meet her, the anima, the spirit of the universe. He arrived at the Railyard at 3 a.m. It was a graveyard of industry. Skeletal cranes loomed against the night sky like dinosaur bones. The tracks were overgrown with black weeds. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the crunch of gravel under his wet sneakers. He scanned the area with his flashlight. The beam cut through the mist, illuminating rust and decay. He needed a sign. Sector 4. He saw a rusted sign hanging by one bolt. Section 4. Arthur gasped. It was real. It was all real. He climbed over a concrete barrier, tearing his pants, scraping his knee. He didn't feel the pain. He moved deeper into the maze of train cars. "I'm here!" he called out. His voice cracked. "I followed the breadcrumbs." He saw it. A massive black tanker car sitting alone on a dead-end track. On the side of the tanker, sprayed in fading yellow graffiti, was a symbol. It looked like a spiraling eye. Arthur fell to his knees. The eye. The same eye he had seen on the dollar bill, in his dreams, in the swirl of his coffee. This was the center of the mandala. He scrambled up the side of the tanker car, his fingernails digging into the wet rust. He reached the hatch on top. It was heavy, sealed with years of grime. "Open," he commanded. "I have the key." He pulled with all his remaining strength. He screamed, his muscles tearing. With a metallic screech that sounded like a gunshot, the hatch gave way. Darkness yawned beneath him. The smell wafted up, a thick, cloying stench of rot, ammonia, and something sweet. Arthur shined the light down into the belly of the tanker. "Hello?" he whispered. "I'm ready to receive the message." At the bottom of the tanker, in the circle of light, something moved. It wasn't an angel. It was a makeshift nest. Rags, newspapers, trash bags. And in the center of the nest sat a man. He was gaunt, his skin gray and caked with grime. His hair was a matted mane. He looked up at the light, blinding him, and hissed. Arthur froze. "Are you the keeper?" The man scrambled backward, crab-walking against the curved metal wall. He was clutching something tightly to his chest. "Mine," the man croaked. His voice was like grinding stones. "The birds told me you can't have it." Arthur blinked, rain dripping from his nose into the hatch. "The birds sent me too. We are brothers. Show me the truth." Arthur began to climb down the ladder into the tank. "No!" the man screamed. He lunged forward, brandishing a weapon, a sharpened screwdriver. Arthur dropped to the floor of the tank, slipping on the slime. He shone the light on the man's treasure. He had to see it. It was the culmination of 30 days of suffering. The man held out the object. It was a dead rat. It was dressed in a doll's dress. Around it, the man had arranged piles of pigeon feathers in a perfect geometric circle. "The Queen!" the man babbled, stroking the dead rat. "She speaks in numbers. She told me you would come to steal the codes." Time stopped for Arthur. He looked at the dead rat. He looked at the feathers. He looked at the deranged man's eyes. And in those eyes, he didn't see a prophet. He saw a mirror. The man had the same frantic energy, the same desperate belief. The man had followed his own signs, his own synchronicities, and they had led him here, to live inside a rusted chemical tank, worshipping a carcass. There was no grand design. There was no secret reward. It was just mental illness echoing in a metal chamber. The horror that washed over Arthur was worse than fear. It was a complete ontological collapse. The magic drained out of the world in a single second, leaving behind only the cold, hard, brutal reality. "It's not real," Arthur whispered. "None of it is real." The homeless man lunged, swinging the screwdriver. "Thief!" Arthur screamed. He dodged the strike, the metal tip tearing his jacket. He kicked out, hitting the man in the chest. The man fell back onto his pile of feathers, wailing. Arthur scrambled up the ladder, slipping, banging his shins, gasping for air. He vaulted out of the hatch and tumbled down the side of the tanker, hitting the gravel hard. He didn't look back. He ran. He ran past the Sector 4 sign. It was just a parking designator. He ran past the I graffiti. It was just a tag by a local gang. He ran through the rain, slipping in the mud, weeping not for his safety, but for the loss of his beautiful, meaningful universe. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing on the sidewalk under the harsh buzz of a street lamp that flickered, meaningless and indifferent, above his head. Arthur spent 3 days in the psychiatric ward. Diagnosis: acute psychotic episode induced by extreme sleep deprivation and stress. Dr. Evans sat by his bed. She was a woman of science, calm and grounded. She held a clipboard, not a scroll of destiny, just a clipboard. "I feel stupid," Arthur said, staring at his hands. It felt so real. Every number, every song, it all fit together like a perfect puzzle. How could my brain create a puzzle that complex? Dr. Evans clicked her pen. "Arthur, let me tell you about the most powerful search engine in the world. It's not Google, it's your Reticular Activating System. Your brain is bombarded with 11 million bits of information every second," she explained. "But your conscious mind can only handle about 40 to 50 bits. If you saw everything, you'd go insane instantly. So the RAS acts like a bouncer at a nightclub. It decides who gets in." She leaned forward. "When you made that pact, when you told yourself search for signs, you gave the bouncer a new guest list. You told him to let in anything that looked like a pattern." Arthur nodded slowly. "The red cars..." "Exactly. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon," she said. "The red cars were always there, Arthur. You just ignored them before. But once you focused on them, your RAS highlighted every single one. It's a feedback loop. You look for a pattern, you find a coincidence, your brain releases dopamine, so you look harder. It spirals." "But the radio," Arthur argued weakly, "it answered me." "Apophenia," Dr. Evans said gently. "The human brain is an unmatched pattern recognition machine. We evolved to see tigers in the grass so we wouldn't get eaten. But when that machinery malfunctions, we see faces in clouds. We hear voices in static. We connect a divorce ad on the radio to our own relationship problems." Arthur looked out the window. It was a sunny day. A bird flew by. Just a bird, hunting for worms, not delivering messages. "The coordinates," Arthur whispered. "They led me to a man who was just like me." "That is the tragedy of it," Dr. Evans said. "You were looking for meaning outside of yourself. You wanted the universe to drive the car because you were afraid to hold the steering wheel. But the universe doesn't care, Arthur. That's the scary part. It's random." Arthur let that sink in. For 30 days, he had lived in a world where he was the chosen one. Now, he was just a guy who had lost his job and his girlfriend because he listened to static. But strangely, as he watched the random, chaotic movement of the city below, he felt a weight lift. If the universe wasn't controlling him, that meant he was in control. If the signs weren't real, that meant he was free. "So," Arthur said, turning back to the doctor, "no more magic?" Dr. Evans smiled. "The magic isn't in the coincidences, Arthur. The magic is that your brain can create a whole reality from nothing. You just have to make sure you're the one writing the story, not the other way around." Arthur looked at the clock. 4:19. He waited. 4:20. 4:21. Nothing happened. The world didn't end. The world didn't begin. It just continued. And for the first time in a month, Arthur took a breath that felt like his own. Arthur's story is a warning to all of us. We all want to believe. We all want to feel special. Synchronicities are beautiful. They add texture and mystery to our gray lives. When you think of a friend and they call you a second later, it feels like a miracle. But never forget the mechanics under the hood. Your brain is a survival machine, not a truth machine. It will lie to you to keep you safe. It will create patterns to keep you from facing the chaos. Arthur surrendered his agency to the pattern. He looked for heaven and found hell in a rail car. So the next time you see 1111, go ahead and smile. Enjoy the wink from the universe. But then, keep walking. Make your own choice. Because the only sign that truly matters is the one you create yourself. If you've ever gone down the rabbit hole of signs and symbols, tell me your story in the comments. Did it lead you to a breakthrough or a breakdown? I'll see you in the next one video.